Okay, well, I think we're live. I've got green lights and red lights flashing. It's like I'm in an air traffic control tower. Welcome, everybody, to Canadian Mortgage Hangout. I am your co-host, Rob Campbell, out here in the lovely Ontario, province of Ontario. Joined with me is my partner in crime, Gord McCallum. Gord, just wave at the camera, would you? Yeah, he's giving a thumbs up there. Gord's contracted the Ebola virus while eating E. coli at a local restaurant. We're not sure what's going on, but he'll be diagnosed soon. We know some people are watching live, so we really appreciate everybody watching live. Excited to have Scotty Peckford on the broker on the Canadian. I was about to say on the podcast today, Scotty. I'm totally taking over.
It's all good, man. It's all good.
Scott Peckford is here today with us. He is obviously the founder of I Love Mortgage Brokering podcast. If you're a mortgage broker in Canada, whether it's first week in the business or 10 years in the business, it's a really good podcast to listen to. It gives you some insight into figuring out what some of the competition or colleagues in arms are doing with their business to take them to the next level. So, Scotty, thanks so much for coming onto the show today.
Thanks for having me. Sorry about the technical difficulties. I normally don't dress up because nobody sees me. So, right, I got a face for radio, and so I had a heck of a time getting the camera to work. But now we got it. So,
for those of us who are over 40 and watching this, Scott, what exactly is a podcast?
Yeah, good question, Gord.
It's a radio program that you carry on your phone, and you can decide on any topic you want to listen to. Essentially,
somebody's calling in a hot lead already.
Yeah, we got a caller here, folks. We're going to take them live on the air.
Gordon, what were you going to say?
We have to figure out how to do that.
What's that? Take callers live? Yeah, that's to be determined, I guess, in the future. Okay, so Scotty, we've got about a half an hour here for the show. We know you're extremely popular on the Facebook. We know you've got the I Love Mortgage Brokering fan page as well as the podcast. Why don't you take the next couple of minutes just to tell us about you and how long you've been in the business and all that kind of stuff before we get cracking on some of the discussions.
Sure. So I've been a broker since 2006, and previous to that I was a paramedic. So I spent 9 years as a paramedic, and I started the podcast two and a half years ago. And with the idea of, I've always liked when I go to a conference, sit down, have a beer with somebody, and we trade ideas and have these conversations. And I often found those conversations to be more impactful sometimes than even the conference I would go to, because you get to you kind of pick somebody's brain. And so then I thought, well, instead of going to conferences all the time and drinking all this beer, maybe I could just bring that experience to podcast. And so that's where the idea came from. And so before I launched, I'd heard most podcasts die at 6 episodes. So before I launched, I recorded 10 episodes. And then I actually had a fear of, failure to launch or fear to launch. I had them all done. And I went and sat down with my wife, and I'm like, nobody's going to listen to this. I think this is going to be a waste of time. And she's like, no, you clearly want to do it. So just go plunge ahead. And so but it wasn't, she didn't give me that nudge. I definitely would have bailed on it, because I just was feeling like, and in the first month, of course, there's very few downloads, but it's been growing steadily ever since. So, but yeah.
Awesome. And if you could, just off the top of my head, I thought of this question. Yeah, I mean, at the beginning of anything, at the beginning of CMHTV, I mean, this show was started by, actually, truth be told, it was started by Gord, Jackson, and Scott. I was not on the first show because it was a day where Filogix went down, and the three of those guys basically said, "Hey, let's try out this crazy Hangout nonsense," and just kind of killed the day. So at the beginning, you're right, nobody ever watches, but then after a while, like our last show that we did 2 weeks ago, our welcome back show has been viewed over 100 times on YouTube, not even counting Facebook views, because it was uploaded to Facebook as well. So hundreds of views every week, as well as live viewers. So if you could give us an idea, when you release a podcast now, so let's say Gord was on your next episode and you release that, what are the downloads or the listens in the first week?
We get about 10,000 downloads a month, and the show, not on each episode, but of the shows. And what happens is people get introduced to the show, and then they go back and they listen to all of the episodes get listed. I get episode 2, 3, 4, 5. I can check every month. They're still getting downloads. So it has a really long shelf life, because we're not talking about news in particular. We're just talking about business building practices, right? So I kind of felt like Canadian Mortgage Trends did a really good job of news and sort of stuff that's happening. And that was never my interest. I'm more interested in like the business side of it. How do you build your business? Like, you seen the movie Moneyball. I love that. I can't stand baseball. No offense to anybody who likes baseball, but I love the movie Moneyball because it's not about baseball. It's about the business of baseball, and it's about how do you make your team. Like, I could do that job. I would love that job, but I wouldn't want to play baseball because I would just find it like, for me, it wouldn't be, that part's not exciting. But that's just how I'm wired.
I have a complaint. I think the CMH or the ILMB podcast that you and I did has the least number of downloads of all of them. So I get people call me, people are like, oh yeah, have you heard of ILMB? So and so was on it. It's so great. I really love that person. And I'm like, I was on it. And they're like, huh? What? I think I need a better agent.
Yeah, exactly. Well, yeah, I don't know. That's hilarious. And you know what? Part of it is actually, which is kind of crazy, how important the title of the show is to the number of downloads, especially if it's an old show. So we really put a lot of thought into the titles, and sometimes we do a better job than others. And so if your show wasn't titled well, it won't have the same legs as a show.
We'll blame it on. Yeah.
Yeah, I may not have titled it well.
It was for sure.
So that it's so crazy because when you're looking through a list of shows to listen to, you're going to pick a topic that looks interesting, and so the most interesting headline is going to be the one you're going to grab, unless you know the person's name.
Gordon McCallum talks, and they're like, "Oh wow."
Gordon McCallum speaks on. Let's just keep scrolling. Hey, how about mine? I think mine's actually the lowest because mine was something like how to build your business through Twitter. Maybe would have been relevant if you had interviewed me in 2011, but in 2017, people are like, Twitter? What the?
You only promoted it on Twitter. That's probably why it didn't get any views too.
Okay, so now that we busted his cojones a little bit, Scotty, so you've interviewed a lot of big producers on your podcast, and I'm really, when your podcast was introduced, I was pumped because I've never shied away from asking somebody else how they got to where they are or how they're doing what they're doing. Obviously, if it's not in a competing market, and your idea brought that all to life. How people got to that next level. So you've interviewed a lot of top producers. 100 million, 200 million, 500 million, $1 billion producers.
Yeah, I don't know about 1 billion, but maybe a brokerage with $1 billion.
Well, yeah, okay, brokerage, right? Yeah. Well, let's not, like, one of my favorites of favorites, Ron Butler. Like, they source all their. I'm assuming, Ron, you're probably going to see this. They're sourcing all their leads through marketing. They don't have like an army of agents out in the right. So they're doing a lot of volume. But anyway, I digress. What if you had to take the top 3 characteristics of all the high achievers that you've interviewed? So let me be very clear. High achiever would not be guys like me. If you took high achievers and distilled it down to what's their top 3 characteristics that he or she would share, what do you think that would be? And I'm talking anything right down to like morning routine or working out or or business practices. So the floor is yours.
Okay, so wow, that's quite the question. So you want me to distill like 150 conversations into 3 bullet points, which I'll do my best. But here's what I've recognized is that there are many ways to build a successful mortgage business, and the trick is you got to match your personality to your market opportunity. And so there are people that are really good they like putting deals together. They're like a mortgage ninja, like a Tyler Volk. I don't know if you know who he is, but he's a big producer in Calgary. And so he doesn't need to go out and market because he puts deals together and people keep sending him more business. There's people that are like the Dustin Woodhouse. He's kind of like the celebrity mortgage broker. Then there's people who build teams like Callum Ross and Rob Regan-Pollock. And so I think that the key thing is match your personality to your market opportunity, recognize there's many ways to be successful in this business. And then the other key thing is to really define how does success going to look like for you? Because, for instance, some people do not want a team at all. Like, like Dustin Woodhouse has assistants. Nobody knows he has assistants other than like he does, but his clients have no idea, right? So that's how he wants to run his business. That doesn't mean that it's right for everybody. Just like some people don't want to run a full team. They don't want to have the staff and all the stuff. So you need to define sort of the end goal in my mind. And then you need to match, okay, my personality and what's my market opportunity. And it's different. Some people in a real estate office. I know of a mortgage broker that I'd met at this conference, and she does a ton of volume with people that are self-employed. She was an accountant. She was in an accountant office. Like 80% of her business are BFS. She can read those documents backwards and forwards. So does she need to go out and track after first-time buyers? Probably not. So I think the key is just match those 2 things, and then you'll be successful. I think when you start to try to build your business like someone else because you think you have to do it their way, and it's not matching who you are, then I think that's when you create frustration. But I'd say if there's some key principles that are like critical in no matter what style of business you build, I think the phone is like, other than face-to-face, which is not really, it's a challenging thing to do depending on your market. People in Toronto don't want to drive to your office. So they want to like talk on the phone. So I would say, unless you're in a market that face-to-face makes sense, I'd say the most effective thing to do is you need to be on the phone a lot. I think that that's like the number one thing that the successful people are really good at. They're good on the phone. And then if you want to get to a point where you're, 30, 40, 50 million, you need to delegate tasks to people so that you can stay in your sweet spot. Because if you're stuck doing everything, then you're gonna, you can get frustrated. So that would be like my thought.
Well, and that number, sorry to cut you off, but that number changes too, 30, 40, 50. That may change. It's probably more of a transaction number than a.
Yes, it's units, right? Totally.
Averages in each market are going to be different. So measuring yourself, I found that measuring yourself against other people's volumes, because somebody in Vancouver might only do 100 deals and their average loan amount is 400 grand or 500 grand. They're doing 40, 50 million, but that's only 100 transactions, where the poor guy out in Halifax or wherever, St. John's, is writing 400 deals to get the same volume. So that's
a really valid point.
I agree
to cut you off. Sorry, Gord, to cut you off. There's a little bit of lag time there on the feed, but that's a really valid point that Gord's making, and it's one that we all really need to get ingrained. Is that when we come into this business, I feel like we have this idea in our mind about dollars, right? So it's, if I can only get to 5 million, or then my next step's 10. 10 feels so great. I could just get to 20. You can't focus on them. You can focus on the money, right? Because at the end of the day, getting paid 80 basis points on X amount of dollars means X.
That's it.
But the chances are, if you're in a space where the average home price is lower, without getting into microeconomics, your cost of living is lower as well. So, if you're doing $5 million purchases in West Vancouver or Toronto, chances are your cost of living is higher as well. But it's real. Go ahead, Gordon.
I'll just add to that. Like a good example is a guy like Mark Good, who's been one of the most successful mortgage brokers in the country. He's been on this show. I don't know if you've had him on, Scott, or not. But
yeah, I've had him a couple times.
Yeah, and I don't know what their average loan is, but he wins on market share because a lot of brokers industry are attracted to big average loan amounts because they think that's big average commissions, and so they don't have to do as much volume. But if you look at a small town where you don't have a lot of competition, you may be able to go in there and crush it because nobody else wants your $100,000 average or your $150,000 average. They just want to go big carrots are. So
it's so true, and that's
smaller markets.
That's a lesson to be learned for everybody who's kind of new in the business, right? It's like, it's great to go after that $600,000 or $800,000 purchase or refi. But, I could probably speak for a lot of people in those big cities because we can see the comments on actually, Scott, your Facebook page, I Love Mortgage Brokering, like, hey, where do I put a $2.5 million purchase? Like, I would almost say that you go high enough, there's only so many lenders that are going to look at a deal like that. And again, going back to the new agent in the business, don't focus on that dollar and cents amount. Focus on units. Units is is where you start to tweak the system. And I'm speaking firsthand as well. If you're in your first year, you do 10 or 20 units, or maybe that's not even 10 or 20. Maybe it's 1 unit in your first year, depending on your experience. I don't know what that number is, but if you're compounding on your units every year, the money will come. But you got to really process the units per month. And you're right about Mark Good. That average home value is probably, I'm guessing, 250,000. To a big city broker, that might be chump change, but the mentality is it's another happy customer, it's another happy referral, it's another deal, and you're dominating your market. So good point. So Scott, the top 3 things that I caught were know your strengths, right? Know what you're good at and stick with it.
Yeah.
Hone in your processes, and There was a third one there that I'll catch when I watch this back over again.
I didn't really answer your question exactly the way
It's
you.
okay. It was good dialogue.
You do it to me all the time, so I'm like, it's my turn. I get to like not answer the question properly. I get to like divert and be like, I want to talk about this.
Okay. So you know what? Well, it was good. It was good dialogue, but we'll kind of move on with the question here. Another question that Gordon and I wanted to ask was about, you know, the actual fact of starting your podcast. So for people out there who want to be like I'm an uber social guy, but that's just my personality, right? So, you know, if there's people out there talking to people's strengths, if there's people out there that want to be more social media, podcasting, all that, and it's going to take a lot for you to get out of your shell because maybe that's not you. You know, maybe there might be a better strength that you can look at, right? But for you, Scott, like the podcast that you've started 2 years ago, have you found that it's directly benefited your personal business, whether that's referrals from mortgage brokers or more importantly, just lifting up that status of yours in your community where, you know, people go, wow, this guy's like, you know, because it's kind of that if you're in the public eye, more often than not, it's a perceived sense of professionalism and hierarchy, if you will. So I'm lost for words there, but you kind of follow what I mean?
Yeah. I think that you don't need to be on every platform. So that'll be my first thought is you kind of pick what works for you. If you like video, not everybody can do video. A lot of times I find people they'll do video, but it's awkward for them. And so if that's not your thing, don't do it. Blog. Dustin writes blog posts. You can do podcasts. You can the format doesn't really matter. I think what's critical is consistency. Dave LaRock, like he's written hundreds of thousands of words and built a huge blog around mortgage brokering or mortgage brokers. And so I think that's one piece. But the second thing you said about my business, so my own business initially, yes. So I saw I took all these ideas and I was applying it, but then I quickly realized I'm like, hey, actually, I kind of like the business side of brokering more than I like, and if I have a bent, my bent is marketing more than even mortgage brokering. And so I don't actually broker anymore. So on a day-to-day basis, I have a business partner who takes care of any of my files. So that part is like not something that I'm actively doing. We have some other stuff that we do. We've kind of spun up another company but that's on that side. And then in terms of like my clients do not care that I have an I Love Mortgage Brokering podcast. So that was never. They're like, I don't give a rip. Like, you know, how are you going to help me? What's in it for me? And I don't mean this, that's not in a selfish way, but just in a, people they don't really care that much. So I don't think that people, it made a difference in my local market. So, but it did help with getting into conferences and meeting all kinds of cool people. And so then my network has been expanded like, 100-fold, but it didn't make a difference in my day-to-day business other than the strategies that I applied to the business. Does that make sense?
Hey guys, just a quick question. Rob, I think we need to publish this URL on the Facebook because Angela F tells me that we're not showing up on there yet.
Yeah, I did actually. If anybody's watching live, I did post it in the I Love Mortgage Brokering page. Let me just open it up here. It might start to feed back in a second, but it should be up there. Yeah, it's on there. It's on there. So if whoever's watching, if you're a member of the I Love Mortgage Brokering Facebook page, I just posted the link on there 20 minutes ago. Oh. So you should be able to watch live. And you'll be able to watch it live if you just you won't be able to watch this live, but you'll be able to watch this recorded after the fact on.
That's why it's not embedded.
No, it's not embedded on the website. No. Okay, so that's interesting. So it might have benefited you personally with figuring out which avenue you actually more enjoyed than doing deals every day, Scott. And it also opened up your channel to who you know in the industry, right? And who you can kind of tap on the shoulder and whatnot.
I think so. One of the things, so we have this separate company called Maker Media, and so one of the things we do create podcasts, like local real estate podcasts for people. And those are good because you become the local celebrity. Like, so in the mortgage space, people know, if I go to a conference, people be like, hey, I know who you are, but it didn't help if I go to Kelowna, but nobody cares here. But if you want to become a local celebrity, you can use a podcast as an example. You can use video, you can use a blog like Dustin does. So there's different ways, but there's ways to become the celebrity. But I was never about making myself like, it was more about the business side of it, because that's the part that intrigues me. It's like, how do these businesses work and how are they different and looking under the hood? So that's the part that excites me, not actually, the actual day-to-day brokering, which is why I got a great business partner who takes care of it. So
you feel like this is a little bit of a page out of the Greg Williamson handbook, which is basically, make the superstar the realtor, make them into and they'll appreciate the efforts that you made to market them with referrals. Have you found that to be effective that way?
Yeah. So the guys who are running the local, I don't have a local real estate show, but the guys that run them, they've had good success with building their network, generating business from it. But again, it's one of those things that I see your hand. It's one of those things that it's about, you got to stick with it. It's not, my podcast, my first month was 160 downloads. And I think it was like my mom and my uncle and my aunt. So it takes time. Like you gotta stay with it if you want it to.
And don't lie. About 95 of those were you listening to your own first podcast.
Yeah. No, actually true. So here's the crazy thing. So in my first show, I emailed Peter Matheny. I don't know if you know who he is, but he's a huge producer with Mortgage Architects, like #1 guy. I'm like, so I sent him an email. I'm like, hey, I'm doing this podcast and I'd like to get you on my show. He's like, I don't have a website or anything. He's like, sure. I'm like, holy crap. He said yes. So then I go to interview him. And if you listen to that interview, I was so nervous. It was like, I was terrified because I got like Sidney Crosby that I get to talk to, but I'm like, I've never done this before. So, but you just stick with it and eventually, hopefully you get a little better and you build the audience but the power is in the consistency and just staying, not just trying it and then quitting after a month or two. So
go ahead, Gord.
No, not at all.
Oh, I was going to say you pointed out a really interesting thing there, Scott, and it's one that I've kind of lived by for the past couple of years is don't be afraid to reach out to people in this industry. Okay. Everybody on this show and everybody that's ever been on this show got reached out to, and us as hosts, I've had people call me. I'm sure Gord and Scott have had people call them that are in the industry that have watched the show in the past. And I'll tell you what, going back to Scott, you had said you wanted to start a podcast to help people with the business side. So one crazy thing, when we took a pause from this show, I was at my brokerage head office in Toronto, and we had like a lunch and learn or something, and there was a new agent, maybe in the business for a year, and he stopped me and he said, he looked at me and I never met the guy in my life, and he stopped me and he goes, I think I know you from somewhere. And I was like, okay, prison? I don't know. Like Fisco, by the way, that was a joke.
Back to the milk jug.
Fisco, I've never been in prison. And he was like, I don't know. Like, and we're trying to put two and two together. And he goes, I got it. The internet show, the mortgage show. You're on that show. I was like, yeah, we used to do that. And he said, well, how come you guys don't do it anymore? I've learned so much from that show. And that's where it kind of blew my mind. The value that even little old Robbie or little old Gord or Scotty Peckford, the value that you can bring by just reaching out to other people in the industry is immense. So don't ever feel like you can't reach out to somebody.
Okay, I got a couple things real quick on that note, and then I want to ask Scott a question, and then it's probably a selfish question, but I want to ask it anyway. Somebody else out there. Story side, reaching out. Not only should you not hesitate to reach out to people in the industry, you shouldn't hesitate to reach out to people at all in business, because all of us have been at some point in time. And most of the people who've had success in the industry were in our shoes too, and they struggled, and maybe they had to come up with a plan, and maybe they started and stopped a couple of times before they got the formula right. But most of them will remember the people that helped them and be decent enough human beings to reciprocate, right? And to be willing to share some of what they've learned. A new person. So I tell the story about Larry Pollock, who used to be the CEO of Canadian Western Bank. And Canadian Western, if you don't know it, is based out here in Edmonton, and it's a small regional bank. But at years or something, they were the most profitable bank on a percentage of their revenue. Really, really well run, and really performed very well for their shareholders. And just on a lark, like, we hadn't even started the business. We called them up. And Canadian Western has this thing where they answer their calls. Nothing goes to voicemail. If you're there, they pick it up. And like, we called his number. I don't even know how we got it, but we called his number. And we were like, we actually weren't expecting him to pick up, but we thought we'd try. We said, hey, we're starting a mortgage brokerage. Wondering if we could borrow a little bit of your time just to we're doing a little market research, want to understand. Sure, he goes, come on down. And so like a week later or 2 weeks later, we had an hour in his office at the top of the tower downtown of information, and it was a real eye-opener. So you never ask the question, you never get the sale, so to speak, or you never get the opportunity if you're not willing to reach out. So throw it out there. You won't get everyone, but Scott, in your conversations with other brokers, how many of them have there been some that were former bankers that have became brokers, and if so, what were their challenges coming into the selfish part of it? Is I just hired somebody who's been a mortgage specialist for 15 years. She's a wonderful lady, very smart, well respected, but I want to be able to coach her on some of the things that she's going to encounter making that transition from banker to broker.
That's a great question. So yes, I've interviewed quite a few people that have been previous bankers. Actually, quite a few people. It's surprising, and there's a couple of things that seem to come up. One, often the challenge is just the vast amount of information that they have to sort of disseminate to put a deal together. When you worked at a single lender, you could get all the policies, it all works. Now you go work where you're a broker and you're like, what? And everybody's different. It's like a maze that's constantly shifting. And the way the government's doing it, they keep moving doors and doing renos, and we can't even find our way through it. And we've been doing it a long time. So I think that's one of the big challenges. But I know your system probably that may not matter because I think you have some underwriting support. And I think that was a big thing. And then the other part was just being able to communicate. So if somebody's been an RBC customer or specialist for 15 years, and now they switch to a bank, how do you communicate that to your referral sources and partners that are going to reach out to you and say, how come you're there now instead of here? Because I thought that you bled blue and now you're doing this. And so I think that Julie Jeffries is a girl in Calgary, and I guarantee if you reach out to her, she was with the Big Blue Machine for a long time, and she's fantastic. But and she even says in her interview that I did with her about how she communicates that. But one of the things she says is the reason I changed from being a mortgage specialist, even though I love the bank, was because I now have more choice for my clients. And so then her clients are like, oh, okay, so this is actually a benefit to me. And so as long as the person can communicate that to their referral sources and partners, I think that's not going to make a difference. And then on the technical side, it's just, okay, if they're having trouble putting loans together, you got to have some support for them, or you got to, because it's just it's a kind of a gong show to figure out how to even read a rate sheet anymore. But
right.
That's my 2 bits on that.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Yeah.
Yeah, Julie Jeffries is a rock star. She's definitely one to reach out to.
And she spoke at our Calgary Broker Talks, and she was like awesome. So the only thing that you made me think of, though, I wrote this down while you were chatting, was that no matter what problem somebody's having in their broker business today, somebody else has already solved it. The challenge is just going, okay, here's my problem, and then I got to get that in the camera. Here's my problem, and then this guy over here, or Julie Jeffrey, somebody else already has the solution. Yeah. And so what I love about out of mortgage brokering is we're just helping each other, because we're not each other's competition. At the end of the day, 70% of the business is being done by the banks. We got lots of growing to do before we're really like stepping on each other's toes. And let's get after it and make our channel bigger and badder, and help each other instead of thinking about like the guys of competition across the street. I just don't believe that. I believe if we collaborate, we'll get better. And then the banks will be like, oh crap, we're going to have to like maybe mess with the government in order to put,
again.
We just went political. What?
Chemtrails. Somebody just
got in there.
Yeah.
Inside
job. 9/11 was an inside job. I'm just kidding. I have no idea.
Oh man! Wow. Reported here first. You know what? It's funny. At the beginning of everybody's career, there might be that little tiny bit of competition where you might poo-poo other brokers in your city. Out of the starting gate. And I think and I'll speak personally here, so I can throw myself under the bus. At first, you're like, man, F them. They suck. That guy's a donkey, or they're blah, blah, blah. And then after 2 or 3 years in this business, when your skin gets real tight and you look like you got dragged behind a bus for 10 years, you start to really appreciate other brokers and the size. And again, going back to the units, but also the volume in units they're doing. After a while, you kind of go, you know what? The only idiot was me for kind of behaving that way. You're right, Scott. It's a 30% market share. Like, if you're losing sleep overnight, I don't know about you guys, or I don't know about anybody watching. We got quite a few, about 38,000 people watching live right now. Thanks for joining us. I don't really generally lose a deal to another broker. It's 99 times out of 100, it's either a bank or Butler Mortgage.
Right.
Anyway, so Scotty, just winding down here. Why don't you tell us a little bit about Broker Talks? When are the next events, and how can people find out more about this format? Tell us a little bit about the format first,
Sure.
and then tell us where we go and how we find out about attending something like that.
Okay, so the Broker Talks event actually was an idea I had before the podcast, and so I thought to myself, I've been to a lot of mortgage conferences, and I'm like, I want to get into the nitty gritty of how to build my business. And I found that a lot of times at conferences, it didn't feel like I'd leave and I'd go. The conversation in the lobby was more useful than sometimes what I was getting from the front. No offense to any of the other organizations that have done these, but so I thought I would like to do an event, and it would be sort of like a mix of a TED Talk and a mastermind. And so the TED Talk portion is we have a high producing broker who gets up and does their TED Talk for mortgage brokering, and they share their best stuff or their best concepts. And we have people sitting in tables of 8, and then what happens is they take that idea and then they share it and they go, okay, that's a good idea, but in my market I do it this way. And so the idea is that when you give a good idea to smart people, they always come up with new ways to apply that idea. And so I'm like, let's just be a catalyst for, that speaker is like the catalyst. And then at the tables, we're like, hey, let's trade some ideas. Let's be open. We're not each other's competition here. And we did one in Calgary, and it was like, honestly, again, my normal MO is I have really high confidence on an idea, and then just before it launches, all my confidence goes away, and I have to throw myself off a cliff because I'm scared to death. And so the Broker Talks in Calgary, I was like, oh my gosh, I'm so scared. What if this doesn't work? And I threw myself off the cliff, and thankfully the people there were amazing, and the speakers were amazing, and the event turned out awesome. And so we're going to be in Calgary in Vancouver, February 20th, and Toronto, February 16th. And if you check the speakers we have some amazing people coming to share. And so it's a very different type of event. It's going to be a completely different feel than what you've kind of experienced before. But I'm jacked about it because it's just, I feel like it's the opportunity to not only, because the other thing too is that, so this is my last little rant on this, but to have somebody talk at me for an hour they have to be really good to keep my attention. Like if I go to a speaker, it's got to be like Scott Stratton. If he's talking, okay, I'll listen. But so by making these 20-minute segments, the 20 minutes for the talk speaker, they got to get to the point. They can't just drag this on for an hour. So they get to the point, and now I gotta, if I'm at the event, I gotta bring my brain to the party. I gotta show up and be like, okay, how do I apply this? And so that's where the magic happens, is when you have 100 mortgage brokers who are bringing their brain to the party and oh my gosh, this and this and this. So that's the part that excites me. So that's my my soapbox. I'm done.
God, please don't throw yourself off any cliffs, okay? # Bell Let's Talk. We don't want to do that.
Right. Well played. Fist bump.
Hey, boom. Do I get 5 cents for that? Or
oh man, we're gonna get 5 complaints for that, not 5
probably.
cents.
That's okay. Wow. Yeah. Humor makes me feel better.
You bring up a good point. First of all, to hear somebody talk for an hour, I'm surprised people actually watch this show, because I can't even listen to myself talk for 5 minutes. To go and sit in front of a speaker for an hour is grueling for me. And most often than not, I got to get up and go to the bathroom or just walk. I'll tell you, Scott Stratton spoke at the MPC conference. He was great. There's a lot of great speakers. You know who wasn't great? OSFI.
Well, but really, I'm surprised.
Wow, it was like having your last rights read to you. Holy smokes! Any questions? No, he's just walking off. Okay, great, thanks. Listen, Scotty, thanks for coming on. If anybody wants to reach out to Scott, they can find him at I Love Mortgage Brokering on Facebook, the podcast. I don't know if you're on Twitter still. Are you on Twitter at all, Scotty?
For a ride in a boat somewhere sometime with somebody. Fly out to Kelowna. It's cheap on WestJet. Get in a boat, drive around. It's a beautiful town.
That's right. WestJet. I'm going to the Broker Talks event in Toronto. I'm looking forward to it. And just a bit of a plug here. Next time we do this show, I still have to confirm, but I am going to name drop. The next show is going to be the 9th of February. I'm doing my best to lock it down, but it looks like we're going to have Paul Taylor, the president of Mortgage Professionals Canada, on the show. with maybe some of the other, people, the provincial directors. I'm hoping to have Dustin Woodhouse on the show as well on that show. But Paul Taylor primarily, we want to hear what MPC has to say about what they're doing about all the government changes. And full disclaimer, I'm not an MPC member locally. I'm part of the provincial, the provincial group. But wanted to get MPC on so that they can voice their thoughts about what's going on and what they're doing, because I don't see anything being done. But that's not to say that they're doing stuff behind the scenes. So that's why I wanted to give Paul Taylor himself and MPC an opportunity to come on and make good on what they're doing and let us all know, fill us in, because I hope to leave that show with a better understanding of the progress that's being made for our industry. So that'll be a pretty big show if we can iron that out. But it looks like they will be on. Scott, thanks again for coming on. We will be posting this on our Facebook page, the Canadian Mortgage Hangout Facebook page. Any parting words, Scott?
No, just help each other, man. Like, we're not each other's end. Let's grow the pie. Let's not fight over the slice of pie. Let's take our competitors' pie, which is the banks. And I think if we have that mindset, we're all gonna, that's gonna be better for us. So that's my last words.
Awesome, Gord.
No, great job. Thanks for putting up with me while I feel like there's a guy jackhammering on my head who's also being jackhammered on by another guy.
So Gord's going to crawl into a petri dish after the show. They're going to ship him off to a lab.
I'll come back anytime you want me to. So if you want me to, whatever, I like actually, it's good format when I can get my technology to work.
Well, thanks so much for coming on. Thanks everybody
Scott.
for watching. We will leave the show as we always do with our traditional goodbye.
Bye.